Welcome back to Let's Have It Out. My guest tonight is ZANU-PF Spokesperson Kennedy Mandaza. Kennedy, we continue with our conversation. Would you agree that the fundamental problem in Zimbabwe was the lack of the rule of law?
Not necessarily. We are talking about an issue of land, an emotive issue for that matter. An issue that brought about quite a number of parties on the table during the Lancaster House Conference. And during that time, so many issues were brought up and people made commitments. And part of the commitments which were made by the British government then was to make sure that after 10 years they will supply funds for making sure that whoever has had his land taken would be compensated for the developments that he had made. But the British government reneged. And at the end of the day, after the conference, the land conference that took place in Victoria Falls, another commitment was made. And when Tony Blair came into power, he reneged again. And this frustrated the majority of the people that were in Zimbabwe. And they went onto the farms in order to address the land question. And we should understand that this was a revolution. And during the course of a revolution, some of the things that take place during a revolution are not called for and they are not planned. And this is what happened. It was not a question of the lack of rule of law, but it was a question of trying to make sure that we address the injustice that was there. Bearing in mind that the majority of the land that was there was owned by only 6,100 people who owned more than 80% of the land, and which was the most fertile part of the land. And the majority of the black population was reneged to the infertile land. And people had to make sure that the issue of land is addressed.
Well, of course, you are giving them back the land now under President Mnangagwa. But I want to ask you a different question. You've mentioned the Lancaster House Agreement. This was an agreement reached in 1979. It made a specific provision that whenever there is expropriation of land, it should be accompanied by compensation. That same agreement allowed the government of Zimbabwe to forcibly take away the land. But by 2000, there had been very little progress on the land reform. Would you accept that? That's why there was a new constitution proposed in 2000.
What we agreed to is the fact that by 2000, not much had taken place in terms of land redistribution, because ordinarily the government of Zimbabwe did not have the funds to compensate the white farmers from whom the land was going to be taken. And it was going through the willing buyer, willing seller agreement, which was the agreement that which is what they had agreed during the Lancaster House Conference, which, like I had already indicated, required the British government to supply the funds which was needed to compensate the white farmers. So on one hand, the funds were not available, and on the other hand, the white farmers were not willing to cede their farms. They were not willing to sell their farms. So it would get to a point where you would want to make sure that the land gets back to the owners. And it frustrated quite a number of people. And on the other hand, we find also modalities that were put in place by the government, making sure that they come up with two models. One, the A1 farm model, and the other, the A2 farm model, where the people were supposed to be decongested from the villages where they stayed, and also making sure that we bring about productivity on the land. That did not take place at the pace at which the government required.
We will go to social media. We'll see one of our viewers, Michael, on Facebook. He says the following: the lessons that can be learned from Zimbabwe on land expropriation without compensation with ZANU-PF are hyperinflation and shortage of basic commodities, and also mass retrenchment. Thank you, Michael, for the comment. It's obvious there was a devastating economic consequence to the land reform in Zimbabwe. You've accepted two consequences of it: corruption and haphazard nature of land reform. How do you explain this?
Ordinarily, the Zimbabwe's economy is based on agriculture. And because Zimbabwe's economy is based on agriculture, the moment we took the land from the minority whites and redistributed to the majority of the people, 276,000 households, it meant that we had tempered a little bit with the agriculture sector, which has so many linkages. It has the downstream linkages and the upstream linkages in terms of the value chain. And at the end of the day, it affected quite a number of these industries that rely on agriculture. Those that supply the inputs, those that the manufacturing industry. We also look at those that were making the machinery. All these were affected. And at the end of the day, we also have the farmers that were on the farm, who had gone on the farm without the right skills, without the right knowledge, and they are not producing. At the end of the day, it affected the economy and it brought us, but that was not only the main reason. It was, yes, it had a bearing to the downturn of the economy of the Zimbabwe, but there were also other issues such as the perennial climatic change that took place at that time.
Let's take a caller. We have Mumdia from Cape Town on the line. Hello, Mumdia. What is your question or comment?
Yes, Advocate Tembeka, I've got a question one for you. Do you think Chapa won the election? And then the other question goes to Mandaza. How do you rate the land reform program in Zimbabwe, given the fact that most of the people who benefited from the land reform were ZANU-PF top notch of the league? I am one of those people who is from Zimbabwe. I haven't seen the production from the land reform that was grabbed. Thank you.
You've heard the question, and I think you've admitted the corruption, the haphazard nature, the impact on the economy, and the fact that there was just no proper planning. So the caller now introduces a different aspect to it, that the beneficiaries were primarily the politically connected.
I think that issue has been raised on a number of occasions by many people, that the politically connected got more than what they deserved. But this is the reason why now we now have the Land Commission, is to make sure that it goes into this particular issue and many other issues that are surrounding the land redistribution program, to make sure that people remain with one farm or one farm per individual. If there are people that were politically connected that got more than what they deserved, the current president has said that that land will be taken from them and be given to those that are deserving.
We take more of your questions and comments after the break. Don't go away.